I'll be reading from the first book. If you want to know what happens, you will buy it and read the rest. And so in this case, I'm going to introduce you right from the top of the book to my guard. The year is 1888, although this prologue starts a bit earlier to let you know what happens to these fine spirit hunters as children. So basically, when I'm asked to describe this book in 2 words, I say Victorian Ghostbusters. And people are either like, yeah, or no, that's not my thing. So, but thankfully this is your thing. So you're in this very haunted house, and I feel Eliza is quite truly with me. Maybe back there to the left because it's really cold right here. So, but I'm really, really thrilled. And thank you so much to this mansion, because the minute I step into these grounds, it's a little bit of time travel. I always felt like I was born in the wrong era. And that's always been a little bit painful. A lot of old souls in the audience, and we know what that feels like. But stepping onto these flagstones, it feels like home. So thank you, Eliza, for letting this be home for us for tonight. So thank you. I'm going to start right up at the beginning, and so hopefully, since it's page 1, it shouldn't need a whole lot of introduction. The air in London was grey. This was no surprise. But the common eye could not see the particular heaviness of the atmosphere or the unusual weight of this special day's charcoal clouds. The sky roiled with a potent wind, for the guard was searching for new hosts. To London they came, and that wind full of spirits began to course through the streets of the city, merciless searching, around corners, elbowing aside London's commoners and high society alike, nudging through market crowds and tearing down dirty alleys. They sought their intended. A candle burst into flame in the window of a marquette's house. The tiny cry of a young boy summoned his mother into the drawing room. Similar sounds went up in other parts of the city, confused gasps growing into amazed giggles before being subdued into solemnity. One by one, the intended targets were seized. 6, 5. Where's 4? 4. Now 3. Alone and unaccompanied, the children left their respective houses and began to walk. And 2. Searching for the final piece, the greatest of the possessors paused as a hesitating hunter, deliberate, and finally, the brightest, boldest, most promising catch of the day, 1. Complete. A sigh of relief. The city's infamous fog thinned. Only a bird above espied the 6 drawing around London Centre, weaving through a maze of clattering carriages, stepping cautiously over heaps of puddles. A sextet of children looked about the cluttered merchant lanes and sober business avenues with new eyes, and saw strange sights. There were ghosts everywhere. Floating through walls and windows, they rose up through streets and strolled beside quiet couples. One by one, each transparent form turned to the children, who stared in wonder and apprehension. In ethereal rags, spirits of every century bowed in deference, as if they were passing royalty. Drawn from all corners of London, 5 children gathered in a knot at the crest of Westminster Bridge. Nodding a silent greeting to one another or curtsying, the youths found each other's faces unsettlingly mature. Excitement tempered by confusion crept into their expressions as they evaluated their new peers, in garb ranging from fine clothing to simple frocks, their social statuses clearly as varied as their looks. A spindly girl, whose brown hair was pinned tightly to her head, kept turning, looking for something, clutching the folds of her linen frock and shifting on the heels of her buttoned boots. It was her tentative voice that at last broke the silence. "Hello, I'm Rebecca. Where is our leader, then?" A sturdy, ruddy-cheeked boy in a vest and cap, cuffs rolled to his elbows, gestured to the end of the street. "Hello, Rebecca, I'm Michael. Is that him?" Approaching the cluster was a tall, well-dressed, unmistakable young man. A mop of dark hair held partly with the wind, blowing about the sharp features of his face, while timeless, even darker eyes burned in their sockets. His fine black suit gave the impression of a boy already a man. He reached the group and bowed, his presence magnetic, confident, and somewhat foreboding. In a rich, velvet voice, deep as the water of the Thames, he spoke. "Good day. My name is Alexei Reichman, and this has turned into the strangest day of my life." He glanced at the spindly brunette next to him, who blushed. "Hello, Alexei, I'm Rebecca, and I feel the same." Alexei firmly met every child's gaze in turn, prompting introductions. "Elijah," a thin, blonde boy said, his features sharp and his eyes a startling blue. He was garbed in striped satin finery that seemed rakish, if not foppish, on such a young man, and he was clearly the wealthiest of the lot. "Josephine," A beautiful olive-skinned brunette added in a soft French accent. She sported the latest fashions, but 2 shocks of white hair framed her face. Michael, chimed in the sturdy boy, with a brilliant, contagious smile. Lucretia Marie O'Shannon Connor, replied the last in an Irish accent. The speaker stared shyly at the cobblestones, dark blonde hair falling to veil her frightened face. Her plain calico dress bespoke modest means. Pardon? Elijah's drawn and angular face became even more pinched. I suppose you could call me Jane if that'd be easier? The girl murmured with a shrug, still staring at the street. I'll say, Elijah laughed. Alexi's eyes flashed with a sudden unfocused anger, and here I thought all my life I'd be a scientist. It seems forces at large have other plans. I don't suppose any of you has the slightest idea of what we're supposed to do. Everyone shook their heads, as surprised with their new destinies as he. Then let me ask a mad question. Does anyone all of a sudden see ghosts? Yes, the others chorused, relieved that if this were madness, they weren't alone in it. Can you hear them speak? He asked. No, was the universal reply. Neither can I, thank God, or we'd never have another moment's peace. But I suppose we'd better get to the bottom of this. I saw a chapel, but I've never been there, and I don't know where it is. Rebecca, still blushing, pointed. I think that raven can show us. Above, a hovering black bird was waiting for them. The new guard looked up and nodded, then followed the bird through the bustling heart of the city. The raven stopped at an impressive edifice, labeled Athens Academy. And it's at the Academy that our story truly begins. So, fast forward about nearly 20 years, there's a prophecy. My Ghostbusters, my guard, they have had this prophecy that there's going to be a 7th member to join their band of 6. And it's 1888 when the story takes place, so Jack the Ripper has been shredding victims in Whitechapel, and they have no idea what's going on because it doesn't fit any of the profile for a spectral disturbance. And they feel that maybe it's time for prophecy. It's getting pretty dark. They're hoping that this prophesied 7th member will help them against this new spectral foe. Enter 2 different candidates. One of them, we know right off the bat, is not the right one. So the reader here knows a lot more than the characters. It's one of those moments where you're like, oh, stop! But that's the fun of it. Watching the train wreck, watching the beautiful, glorious Victorian train wreck that is this first book. It's beautiful. And so we have 2 candidates. So I'm going to introduce you to one of the candidates, and you tell me which one is the prophecy member. Right? So this is actually a new scene. So those of you who are familiar with the book will not have read this scene, because Melissa basically said, you know, the guard of Ghostbusters, this is fine and good, but when they see the false prophet, the one that they're not supposed to invite into the ranks, and they do anyway, let's not make them look dumb. Let's actually have a little bit more magical things going on, because it's a little too subtle, and right now they look a little too easily duped by a pretty lady, which is fine and good, but we'd like them to be a little more discerning than just that. So this is why. Enter some magic. The groundskeeper reports destabilization. Shall I go and see for myself? I have an idea where to find them. The servant of shadow stated, her toe on the threshold between the eternal and the mundane, listening from a portal she'd made by the pricking of her thumbs. Her blood made a map upon her hand, directing her. Do let me go. The darkness shook and roared. Go, for the love of the unholy, go already. You don't have to be such a brute about it. The woman made a fierce face and turned in a huff towards the portal. You'd be wise to respect my powers. With her bloody finger, she smeared droplets onto her collarbone, then dragged a clean hand across the gray, ashy grit of the whisper world, and its interior, pressed it to her bosom. A hissing, rattling sound echoed about her head as she breathed life into the blood and grime. When she lifted her hand again, a silver pendant with a blood-red ruby hung at the swell of her breast. She raised her arms, fingertips still dripping blood, and the mists of the whisper world responded to her bidding. With another hissing rattle and a swirl of death's miasma, her garb transformed from whisper world winding sheets into a tailored satin bodice and elaborate skirts of the latest human style. Swishing through the portal onto a cobblestone alley, the mouth of which opened onto a promenade over the Thames. Darkness's best asset turned to his shadowed form. You know, you'd best be nice to me, or I'll switch sides and join their fight instead. The shadows grunted. You wouldn't dare. The woman narrowed emerald eyes. Are you threatening me? I'd advise against that. You'd best consider a promotion to minor arcana status. I'm far too talented not to be better recognized. If you knew it was best for you, you'd replace her with me. Darkness roared, but the servant expected it and did not flinch. Treat me better or I will turn on you. It's high time I was important to someone. She turned to the cityscape before her. Hello, London. What a pleasure it is to descend upon you as the herald of your dark age to come. So, gee, I wonder if that's the bad girl or not. Don't leave a lot of room for interpretation on that one. So, obviously, there's a fight between the mortal world and the spirit world. And my guard of Ghostbusters is stuck orbiting this disconnect. And but they can't hear the spirits. Well, there's someone who can. And it's this lovely young woman named Percy Parker. And she has come to Athens Academy, and she's older than the other students. She's a special case. She was raised in a convent. She is entirely pale as the ghosts that she sees and can speak to. But she doesn't tell anybody about this because she would be thought crazy. Yes? So she comes to Athens Academy and is immediately struck and completely entranced by her mathematics professor, Professor Alexei Reichman. And so during private tutorials, because she's very bad at math but very good at everything else, kind of like me. And so she has these private tutorials, and she gets very flustered, and it's very cute. I'm going to read all about it. In this particular tutorial, neither Alexei doesn't go around saying, "Hey, class, I'm a Ghostbuster." He doesn't do that. He keeps this stoic exterior. The grand work of orbiting spirits, that is what he does outside of class. When he is a professor, he is a very good professor, and he takes that very seriously. So he does not let anyone know that he can see spirits, and Percy doesn't either, and then thusly, hijinks ensue. In this particular case, I'm reading this because it's my favorite scene I've ever read or written, well, of my own. I'm not going to say it. I have lots of books that I love, but of all of my work, I think this is my favorite scene. So Percy is going to the professor's office after hours for a tutorial. On his office door, a tag held a folded piece of paper marked Miss Parker. The note inside read, "I shall likely be otherwise engaged at the time of your arrival, Miss Parker. The door is open. You may enter and await me inside. Reichman." Percy folded the note with care and tucked it into her corset, placing the lovely spiral script next to her heart. Dreaming at a note of a more personal bent, she suddenly flushed, appalled at how easily her fancy took flight. Glancing furtively about the room, she couldn't help but make a bold dash to the professor's phonograph, a luxury of which she was sure her convent would never have approved. Her skirts fluttering as she knelt, Percy examined the various wax cylinders stored in a shelf beneath the machine. Her gaze fell upon a red velvet box labeled in gilt letters, Lacrimosa, from Mozart's Requiem. Her choice was made. Inserting the cylinder, she turned the crank and a needle made contact. The melody began as a simple ascending line of strings, mournful and glorious, and it halted Percy's breath. She stepped away, beaming, relishing every note. The choir began to sing, the voices ebbing and flowing. Within the first few bars, as if summoned spirits, began to pour through the walls, windows, and ceiling of the professor's magnificent office. Each note drew a new soul from the fabric of the air, as if all the spirits of Athens Academy had been beckoned to fill the room in rapture. Percy stood amazed and delighted at the influx of spirits of all times, cultures, and classes. They twirled around her, dancing and reveling to the gorgeous death mass, singing in unison with the choir. Like a butterfly shedding its chrysalis, Percy tossed her shawl, eyeglasses, and gloves upon the desk and abandoned herself, as spirits did, to the music, sharing a bond with them that went beyond their coloration. Her skirts spun out around her. Constance, the haunt of the science library, wafted near. Her spiral curls bounced weightlessly. "Hello, Miss Percy. This one is our favorite. However did you know?" Percy just giggled and spun beside her ghostly friend, closing her eyes in a moment of ecstasy. The entire lot, human and spirit, failed to notice as the office door quietly opened and shut. The professor stood just inside the threshold and raised an eyebrow at the spectral bedlam. Setting his jaw, he stared at the veritable army of spirits that had collected in his office uninvited. As he folded his arms and shook his head, a veritable column of black fabric, the haunts began to notice. He shooed each off with a wave of his hand, and they knew enough not to disobey. Miss Percy Parker, what a curious one she was. He wished the mortal young woman could see what kind of chaos she had stirred up, but surely she couldn't. One spirit remained unaware of his presence, staring at Miss Parker with such longing that he reluctantly decided to let it stay. The spirit, a hollow-eyed girl with ringlets and clothing from long past, reached towards Percy, wishing to touch her. Alexei understood. When left to her own devices, Miss Parker was neither shy nor awkward. She was radiant. The spirit turned and caught Alexei's gaze. He nodded a slight greeting. Confusing. Percy pursed her lips. The entirety of the lesson passed with Constance hovering just behind and to the side of Percy's chair in what appeared to be an attempt to distract her. Dread that the professor might finally snap under the strain of her odd behavior and center packing made Percy's hands shake, but she certainly could not explain to him that she was having difficulty concentrating because a dead girl was breathing down her neck. Once the professor had finished his complex little lecture, he sat back in his chair and folded his hands in his lap. Constance, who had attended the lesson as if she too were his pupil,